Nearly 6 centuries had passed since that night, yet the ancient blood feud proved unwilling to follow Lucian to the grave. Though lycans were fewer in number, the war itself had become more perilous, for the moon no longer held her sway. Older, more powerful lycans were now able to change at will. The weapons had evolved, but our orders remained the same. Hunt them down and kill them off, one by one. A most successful campaign. Perhaps too successful. For those like me, a death dealer, this signaled the end of an era. Like the weapons of the previous century, we too would become obsolete. Pity, because I lived for it.
Welcome once again to Success to Series, the Fair Letter franchise spin-off all about Hollywood's hits, winners, and triumphs. I'm Trev.
And I'm Chris.
And typically on this Success to Series, we do franchises that are very beloved, kind of universally accepted, fan favorites. This time might be a little bit different, Chris, but I think once people hear what we have planned, what we want to talk about, they'll be liking what we have to say.
Yikes.
No, okay. I tried.
I'm dealing you some death right now.
It took me 4 hours to write that, so I was kind of hoping. But Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we are looking at today and why we are, given the theme we're in?
Yes, of course. We are looking at the Underworld franchise in the month of February here. As our loyal listeners know, we are in the theme month. We love our themes, and it is Will You Be My VAMPentine? So we're looking at vampire stuff this month, and we thought we'd drop in a nice... Some bit of positivity here in the month of love, and me and Trev both love the Underworld franchise. Created by Len Wiseman, Kevin Graveau, and Danny McBride. Not the Danny McBride we know from the comedy world, but a different one. I like to always talk about my budgets here a little bit. The entire Underworld franchise, their budget was around $207 million. And worldwide, all 5 films have made over $500 million. So I would say a moderate success over 5 films. We talked about the last Success to Series, we talked about the Saw franchise. And the Saw franchise was even a smaller budget, and it made double the amount of the Underworld movies. So it's just an interesting... like we said, we love this series. And I think there's like a fervent... Is that the word? Fervent? Fan
Sure.
Base? Yeah. I think there's a fervent fan base here for the Underworld franchise. We are small, but we are mighty, I would say.
Well, we're small at least. I don't know about mighty.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think what's interesting is that when you talk about, it being like a minor hit, it's what I'm excited to talk about is it's a type of franchise of a time. And I don't think we're going to get any franchises like this anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the thing, is this has become a time capsule franchise, not only in how it looks, the thematics, everything, but also that budget level and that ability to get at least 5 movies out of this level of success.
Totally.
Like, it's totally, we don't see that anymore. This franchise probably wouldn't make it past the first movie today, maybe the first one, I don't know, but I don't think you get to 5.
No, definitely not.
And I think it made sense for us to do this series. I mean, if you're talking, we've dedicated this month to vampires and love. And so there's really only 2 options here, Twilight or Underworld.
Yeah.
and obviously Underworld, I believe, is often looked at as kind of the, like the counterpoint to Twilight. The, hey, this is Twilight, but for the boys,
Totally.
And I guess we fall into stereotypical gender roles. So we will just roll right into that and say, yeah, we like Underworld much more than we like Twilight. Is it better? That's probably negligible, honestly. But I think it just speaks to us a little bit more in terms of what it is.
Totally. It speaks to our sensibilities more than the Twilight films. I've only seen a couple of the Twilight movies. They are fine. They're like fine trash. I find the Underworld movies elevated trash. Maybe I'd
that's
say
a great way. That's a great way to put it. In fact, don't take this like episode as us saying the Underworld series is a masterpiece.
No.
Or these are perfect films. As you listen to us, I think you'll realize we are very aware of their flaws. Sometimes we even love them for those flaws.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is the sort of franchise and sort of movies that I kind of dig. As when you elevated trash is perfect, or like elevated B movies. These are just B movie monster mash trash. That's like a perfect way to put it.
Yep.
Sometimes they have higher aspirations, and often they stumble at that. But often I think they actually kind of clear it in a way that they don't get enough success for, or that they don't get enough credit for, I should say. And yeah, that's what I'm excited to talk about, because it is a series that I think even more so today, as it's been a long time since there's been an Underworld movie. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. We'll talk near the end about what we think is the future, if there is one. But I think today, when you say you really like the Underworld movies, people give you odd looks. I know, because I experienced this with my girlfriend. When I asked her if she wanted to watch these with me for this episode, she was just like, do you honestly like those? It's like, look, I didn't accidentally buy 5 of these Blu-rays, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
as she's saying that to you and questioning you, you're like just slowly rolling up every poster you have and putting them in your closet.
Hey, no lie, the bedroom in my childhood home, the back of the bedroom door always did have an actual movie theater Underworld Evolution poster on it.
Excellent. I love it.
Still there, actually. One of those like glossy posters. I think it's a great poster. With Kate Beckinsale with the guns crossed.
Like the double-sided poster?
Mm-hmm,
that one
yeah.
too? Love it. Love it. So I guess I mean that kind of leads into what I want to question you about here, because we both obviously know that we love Underworld and we've known it for many years from each other. But I got to ask you, in 2003 when this movie came out, like what is your anecdotal history with the movie? Like did you rush out opening weekend? Was somebody pass you the Blu-ray or the DVD at that point? What was your history with this?
No, you know what? I did see it opening weekend because, Chris, I don't know if you took note of the release dates, but the first Underworld was released on September 19th, 2003.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's my birthday, buddy. Awesome. It was a birthday like excursion for me and my friends. I was like, that's the one that's coming out. I want to see. Now, I honestly don't remember if I was super excited to see it or if it was just like that was the movie that was coming out on my birthday.
Sure.
I'm sure I was fairly intrigued by it because, the trailer, first of all, Kate Beckinsale in the leather. We're going to say that a lot, probably.
Falling into gender roles again. Here we go.
Yes. But I mean, let's face it, the movie's marketed on that as well. But,
yes.
The trailer had that Matrix wannabe look that I was still pretty into at the time. We were still not that far removed from the Matrix, and we were still getting a lot of that stylism in films, and I was still digging it. I like vampires and werewolves. I don't think that's any secret. I'm a big horror fan. I like horror action. Horror action is like a tough genre to get right, as even the Underworld films sometimes prove, but I tend to dig it when it's done well.
Sure.
So yeah, I asked my friends if that could be the movie we all went and saw, and my memory is that I was really the only person that liked it. I think my friends were not so into it, and even like what we're talking about with this episode like started for me that first night of me feeling like, oh my god, I kind of have to defend this thing because nobody else was like that into it,
Totally.
But even I walking out was like, yeah, that wasn't great, but I mean, I think it was pretty good. And then that's actually like the theatrical cut, which I probably haven't seen since that night, because I know the Blu-ray or the DVD that came out. Oh no, I guess that was Blu-rays were already going by that point. But the Blu-ray instantly had like the extended director's cut on it, and that's always been the version I watched since. And I remember thinking at the time that was an improvement, but now I don't even remember why I think it's an improvement because I don't really remember what that theatrical cut was.
Totally.
But yeah, I went and saw every installment in the theater, and I've always dug it. And that's like I've always known what it is. I'm not confused about what Underworld is.
Totally.
But I love this series. And I'm sure we're going to make this comparison. We're going to talk about this in other places. But I love this series kind of the same way I love another series that I'm sure we're going to do an episode about later. The Resident Evil series.
Yeah.
Both from Sony, both from Screen Gems, both just, as you said, elevated trash that you sit down, you go, okay, I know this is dumb, but whatever. Kate Beckinsale, Mila Jovovich, zombies, vampires, cool outfits, explosions, gunfire.
Give me my popcorn.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I love it.
Well, that's the thing. This series falls into that the way I personally will rank or rate films is that they know exactly what they are and they're doing it well. Like everybody behind these movies, they know they're not making high art, but they're doing their best to make it like they're 100% creatively in. You know what I mean? They're giving it their best, but they're not like this ain't going to be Schindler's List for anybody. No. You know, like they know exactly what they're making. And for my history with the franchise, back in 2003, I think I was in like grade 10, I think at the time, and one of my best friends bought the DVD and was like, Chris, you got to come over. Let's watch this together. And he's like, I like the cover. Like I like the trailer. We never saw it in theaters. And I went to his place and we watched it for the first time. And we're just like, this is everything that grade 10 Chris wants in movies.
Yeah.
Like this is everything an adolescent boy or a young male or just, this is what I want. I want, you know, a sexy protagonist. I love a dual wielding pistol action. I want complex world building and awesome like gothic atmosphere, slow-mo, gore. This shit had it all for me. So I saw this at home on DVD. I went to go see Underworld Evolution in theaters, and then I saw Rise of the Lycans in theaters. I did not see 4 and 5 in theaters. I actually came to those actually quite a bit afterwards. I think it was after me and you became friends. Honestly.
Yeah, because I think I was telling you about how they were actually like fun, you know.
Yes, and like we'll get later in the episode, we'll get to our ranking and we'll kind of explain what that came from. But yeah, Trev was actually the one that told me, go back to the series. I promise you, have some fun with it.
Yeah, and we'll also talk about why Rise of the Lycans might have been where you jumped off.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, and I think you just said something too that I wanted to feed off of really quickly, because you mentioned how everyone involved with the series knows what they're making. And I do think it's a really fun series to sit down and rewatch from beginning, because honestly, I think that's especially true with the sequels. I think if there's one entry that does seem like it's trying to be kind of high art, it is the first one.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell as soon as you get to part 2 that they're like, let's cool it on that. Let's not try and be as serious anymore. And the melodrama and everything, I'm not to say it goes away, but it becomes much more obviously intent, like campy, you know. The first one I think is the one that has like an air of seriousness to it.
Sure. And I also think I wanted, you know, we're going to be defending this franchise as I think we just already are, but I always hated people saying this was just another Romeo and Juliet. I've always hated that. Should we talk about the premise first of all for newcomers?
Yeah,
I would hope people have seen these movies before coming to this episode. But if you haven't, you know, go at least watch 1 and 2. And
I know on this show we don't often like go through all the films, but I think it's actually kind of important that we at least briefly summarize each of them this time, because this series is so wacky in its continuity and the directions it went. Because you can tell there's a definite lack of consistency and, you know, pre-planning here. So I think it's important. But I think we can start by just talking about the general concept of the first film for sure. Yeah.
So the movie in the first film from 2003 is all around the story of Celine, played by Kate Beckinsale. She's a death dealer for the vampires, which means she's like an assassin for them, because right now there's been like a centuries-long war between vampires and lycans being werewolves.
Does it bother you that they came up with their own term for werewolves, but they just called the vampires vampires?
You know what? Not until this moment. Not until this moment. Because lycan is such a cool name, but vampires also just so cool as well. I don't know what do you call them? You know, fangors. You know, like I have no idea.
Fang bangers.
The fang bang. Oh, a fanger banger.
Yeah.
Okay. So the movie's premise is there's a centuries-old war between these warring factions, and basically, oh man, this is gonna be a little tough actually. It's revealed in the film that there was like the first immortal. His name is Alexander Corvinus, and this guy had 3 children. One, Marcus, who was the first vampire because he was bit by a bat. And then the second, William, who was a wolf, who was bit by a wolf. And they created the vampire and werewolf lines. At this point in time, werewolves did not change back to people. That's very key to say right now. The third son was unnamed, but carried the Corvinus strain of like this genetic pathogen that transferred through centuries of humanity's bloodlines, but was the key to immortality and to create hybrids which was to kind of like bring together the vampires and the werewolves into one super being. Now, there is a man named Michael Corvin who is just a human, and the werewolves are trying to find him and trying to experiment on him, where Celine gets kind of suspicious of why. Why are they going after this guy? And then it's, revealed that Michael Corvin has that Corvinus strain pathogen in him. So he is the key. Unbeknownst to him or the entire world, he's the key to this war. So that's really the first movie, is that Celine discovers Michael Corvin is the key to this war. So she is fascinated by him and tries to protect him, and then they start up a romantic entanglement. Is that fair? Is that a good synopsis?
It's a very simplified but effective synopsis, because we do have to admit that it's a pretty convoluted plot.
You don't say.
There's a lot of characters, a lot of reveals, a lot of like, this is actually the truth that you didn't realize. Yes. A lot of history is given to you. It's a very exposition heavy movie. But that right there sets up one of the things that I kind of love about the series. And I can see how it could bother other people, but I think it's part of the fun of it. Is it's a series that comes with a very pre-established mythology that you can tell they put a lot of work and thought into.
Yes.
Yes. Like they were obviously thinking ahead and thinking about like what's going to be the future of this, and they started sowing the seeds and putting in a lot of pieces already to like reveal later in terms of the backstory with her and like the elder Victor, played by Bill Nighy, and like even her history with Craven and everything. Like it's all set up to pay off later.
And the thing is they did plan this as a trilogy. Maybe not planned it in the perfect way, because I think there is a lot of fly by the seat of their pants going forward. But they did plan on making 2 films and then a prequel. That was always kind of the understanding. Even Kate Beckinsale's on the record saying that this was always pitched to me as a trilogy. So
which is weird, like in retrospect, because a prequel is a weird place to end the trilogy.
It really is, and again,
really, the prequel should have been the second movie, right? But oh well, not to tell them their business.
But. Well, it depends on. Well, again, we'll talk about 1 and 2, but but I would much rather have Evolution come as the sequel. That's what I'd say. But yes, you're right. Yes. Traditionally speaking, a prequel would probably be better in the second movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing that's kind of the first movie all wrapped up in a little bow. I mean, there's a lot to it, but let's just, because we're talking about the first one, we got to talk about our feature players here. Let's start with the woman of the hour, I guess. Kate Beckinsale. I'll say right off the bat, she is. I mean, we have a lot of crushes on this show. I think. I think our fans are very aware of where our allegiances lie. But Kate Beckinsale is. She's like top tier, top of the pyramid for me.
Yeah.
She is not only just stunning and gorgeous, and continues to be. I think she's getting like more beautiful as she ages.
Well, that's the crazy. Like, she's one of those. You couldn't have picked a better person to play a vampire, because if they did decide to make another Underworld today, she could just get right back in that outfit, and it doesn't. She does not look like she's aged since 2003. So.
No, it's incredible. Fuck you, Pete Davidson. But other than that, she is. Yeah, she is awesome. I've always liked her in movies. I think it's just because she's so stunning. I think that helps. I don't want to, I don't want to undermine her talent, but I do enjoy when I see her, and I think she's good in the roles that she does. I'm a defender of Van Helsing, which she did right after Underworld. So that's another episode we covered on our Failure to Franchise main show. Go listen to that. Jar's like, don't listen to it.
Well, listen to it. Just don't watch the movie.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm a fan of Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah, I know we always say to be careful about getting into this like cult of personality with celebrities, but I think the great thing about Kate Beckinsale is she's also one of those ones who just seems so fun in real life. You know, like she's got like a very much one of the guys kind of sense of humor. I kind of hate that as like a term because it's so, but you know what it just.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, she is given that she's kind of known in like 2 camps, right? There's obviously the Underworld camp who knows her for that, but then she's also known for kind of making these like prestigious dramas. Her real life personality seems to lean more into, it's like you would expect her to be in stuff like Underworld. Totally. She does not, like, she's got like a really bawdy sense of humor.
I know what I heard, and I know what my gut tells me, and I am telling you, there could be dozens of Dykans now. Dykans?
If you have the Blu-ray of Underworld, I would really suggest listening to the commentary with her, Scott Speedman, and Len Wiseman. She's very funny in that commentary. She's cracking jokes and making fun of the movie and Scott Speedman the whole time. So much so that I remember being actually bummed that when Van Helsing came out, even though I didn't like the movie, I was really hoping there'd be like another commentary like that with her.
Right.
But there was not, because they just didn't care. Anyways. But no, she seems like insane, but in a very fun way on Instagram. Yeah. You know, she just seems like a very fun, lively. That's a dumb way to put it, but she just seems like a cool person too. And on top of like her beauty and her talent, and she's another one who I'd actually say, okay, we say this for so many actresses, probably has not even had the career she deserves, honestly, and like has kind of. And maybe this, I mean, honestly, yes, maybe Underworld is part of it. And I think maybe she's even aware of that a little bit, but we'll talk about that more as we go forward, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like what you said about her being just has such a fun sense of humor and, again, knows what she's doing in these types of movies. And no wonder she married Len Wiseman, right? Like, no wonder the creator of this franchise married the main character. They obviously got along, same sensibilities. She's fun. I don't know. I hate using such a, small little word for her, but she's a blast. She's a blast.
Though that's probably a good segue into our next performer, because you are right that she did marry Len Wiseman after doing Underworld, but this is the initial controversy of Underworld, right? One of the things it's also known for is when she started work on Underworld, she was not seeing Len Wiseman or involved with him. In fact, she was romantically involved with one of her co-stars in the film, and they had a kid together. And that is Michael Sheen, who plays the head lycan Lucian in Underworld. So
the first Lucian. Oh, sorry. I mean the first lycan. The first lycan. Okay, I'm keeping that in. But the first lycan. Remember, I told you listeners that werewolves in the beginning were just wolves. They couldn't change back to people. But Lucian is revealed later in the mythology to be the first lycan, the first one to be able to change back to human form. So.
I just bring this up because I remember, this is just like an aside, but I think it is an interesting aside of the series, being always fascinated by the story of these three. Because, like I said, Michael Sheen and Kate Beckinsale were romantically involved. They had a kid. Then they go off and do this movie together. And I don't really know what the timing was. I don't know if they were already kind of maybe heading to be on the outs when they started making this movie. But obviously by the end of the movie, they are broken up and she is with Len Wiseman. And you would think that would be really ugly. And I think it's to like everyone's credit that it never was.
No.
The three of them maintained like a great working relationship. Her and Michael Sheen remain friendly to this day, and still co-parent, obviously. But they also like just seem like they genuinely still like each other. Michael Sheen kept working in this series, so he obviously did not take it out on Len Wiseman. Pretty incredible that because I don't know if I could. I don't know if Kate Beckinsale left me for someone else. I don't know that I'd be that cool about it.
Yeah, like Michael Sheen not only plays nice with everybody, he goes on to be the main star of movie 3. And he truly gives it his all as well. He doesn't phone it in ever. So that's a testament to his character as well. Like not I'm not choosing favorites by saying that, by the way. I'm just saying that like Michael Sheen, like you said, I'd be leaving everybody on red.
Yeah. Well, Michael Sheen is like an actor I love. He's like one of my favorites. You mentioned Twilight earlier, and as much as I don't like the Twilight movies, he's like a definite highlight in like the later Twilight movies because he's just like hamming it up. He's another one of those guys who's obviously a very classically trained actor. You can throw him in like Shakespeare and like, pure kind of dramas, which he's definitely done a number of, like, playing Tony Blair and the Queen and stuff like that. David Frost and Frost Nixon. But then he also has this like really nerdy side to him where when you hear him talk about being in Underworld, or the fact that he like pursued being in Tron Legacy, or working with like Neil Gaiman, in recent years. Yeah. He loves this stuff. He's one of us, right? He's like such a nerd. And he like, that's what I dig is the actors who come to Underworld because they want to play in the world of vampires and werewolves. And they just find it as a chance to, probably play the monsters they liked playing and watching as kids. Yeah. And he, like you said, he gives it his all. He's great in all of these.
And that is perfectly segues into the next leading man in this movie is Bill Nighy. Another classically trained Shakespearean Broadway type of play guy. You know what I mean? Like those types of actors. And then he does just so much schlock. Just so much schlock. And we love these two guys, and Bill Nighy especially. Bill Nighy is when he pops in or pops up on a movie or TV screen or anything, I think I'm automatically in. You know what I mean? Like he's just so fun, and his voice, his cadence. Like, I mean, I always go back to Davy Jones, right, from Pirates of the Caribbean. Like that is one of the all-time greatest villains of movie history, and the guy is covered in CGI makeup. It's unreal what he does with that character. So yeah, Bill Nighy is a big plus in the Failure to Franchise co-host here.
Yeah. And it's pretty great that him and Sheen, as much as Beckinsale, become like really attached to this franchise. You know, like Bill Nighy sticks around for like a couple more. He said Michael Sheen comes back for the third one. And this really does start a precedence. You just alluded to it, but each one of these films, all 5 of them, have actors who are probably better than Underworld in them,
Yes,
you know?
yeah.
And those actors never phone it in. You can tell they're having a good time. And I think it's really cool that each time they try and go like, all right, who's the next like actor we can get that's actually going to surprise people that they're in Underworld?
Well, that's what I wanted to... A key word to describe this franchise is earnest. I think this franchise is so earnest in its storytelling and its acting. And again, yes, everybody's giving it their all, but they're taking it so deathly seriously. And that's what I think is working. That we're watching... It's a hard thing to do to create schlock, but not be in on the joke. Do you know what I mean? It's like the Sharknado effect. You know, like those guys are obviously making schlock, and it has its fans, but they're so obviously no. No, but like the people involved are so obviously in on the joke. Where I think Underworld, they know it's schlock, but they're still, again, they're giving it their fucking A+ game. You know,
well, they're doing it the right way, right? It's this is a strange analogy about me because I watched it a couple months ago, but it's the Michael Caine and Muppet Christmas Carol idea, right? Like, you don't perform down to the material, perform at the same height you would do for any role, right? Treat it as seriously as if you were doing a Broadway production or a Shakespeare play in London, you know, treat it that way. And that will actually elevate the schlock in a much better way than trying to like ham it up. It's 2 different energies. You can do both, and Michael Sheen, we know he's capable of both because, like I said, he's very campy in Twilight, and that's probably because he felt like the material was calling for it. But I think you can also just play it deadly serious, and if the dialogue is like melodramatic enough and like the overall tone is serious enough, it will actually create this weird effect where it kind of becomes funny, even though it's not necessarily trying to be. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but if you watch Underworld movies, you'll know what we mean.
Yes, especially when you get to the second one, I think, is when it all clicks into place, as Trev said. You want to talk about Scott Speedman here?
Yeah, I mean, I like him in these, like, you know, in these first 2. Scott Speedman is... I wouldn't say he's an actor I have like much of an opinion about in general. He's certainly been in movies I've dug. You know, I really like The Strangers. I liked him a couple last year in Crimes of the Future, the recent Cronenberg movie. But I think he's just one of those actors you kind of always forget exists because his career never really just took off in the way I'm sure him and his agents thought it might, given that he was like another, like, you know, young, handsome leading man. And obviously coming out of Underworld, he was not the breakout. Kate Beckinsale was, and, you know, Michael Sheen was, and to the point where the franchise, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about it soon, but the franchise has no problem eventually just dropping him, like leaving him behind, which I actually think is kind of too bad. We'll talk about that as we go forward. But I mean, I think he's perfectly serviceable in these. When I say I like him, I'm not saying he's like amazing or anything, but he gets the job done as Michael. You know? You can buy him and Celine together.
And I think you nailed it by just saying he's overshadowed. That's the biggest problem. He came around at the time where every leading man looked like him.
Yeah. And
it was like, who's going to break out first? And unfortunately, he was paired with a stunning beauty, Kate, and then Michael Sheen and Bill Nighy. Like, it's just kind of, he had nowhere to go. Like, how does a Scott Speedman, and this is no disrespect, we don't like making fun of actors. And like, we genuinely like the guy. And I as well saw Crimes of the Future. So when he popped up, I was like, oh shit, Scott Speedman's in this, which was cool. But I think, there's like no room for him in this movie. And I hate to say it like that, but he just kind of gets forgotten about because everybody else is just so much more elevated than he is. And then there's a time at the end of the movie where, you know, spoilers, Michael Corvin becomes a hybrid and he's just kind of now covered in blue makeup. So it's kind of, you know, that's another hard job, right? And he just kind of gets forgotten at that point.
He's definitely better than Shane Brawley as Craven. I'll tell you that.
Oh yes,
Craven is the weak link in the performances in this first movie, but he at least every time I go back and watch this movie, I find his performance so bad it is amusing to me. Like I'll give it that. So no offense, we don't like shit talking actors.
No,
but.
no. Let's jump to the second movie here. Usually on Success to Series we talk about the franchise in vague terms. I think in this one we're going to give a little bit more plot for each 5 of these movies because I think that's why we like the movies.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to tell the audience, and as familiar as I hope you are, listeners, with the franchise, please be aware that we're going to be saying some plot points because this thing gets wild. And it brings up plot and then it forgets about plot and then it brings up plot some more and then it forgets about it. It's just kind of hilarious. So this second movie, Underworld Evolution, comes out 3 years later. This is almost like right after the first movie, right? It kind of works as a perfect double feature.
To the point where I don't know how true this is. I have heard that 1 and 2 at one point were even like one screenplay. Like it was like written as like a very long movie, and then they realized they could split it up. So and when you watch it, that tracks because it picks up right there pretty much. Yeah. And like I said, this one, I don't know. There's a definite tone shift right away because this one right away feels more like a schlocky action movie than the first one was. Like it kind of like starts leaning into the camp, and also it like jacks the gore way up. And that's another thing I want to say about the series. I'm surprised it took me this long to mention it, but I love how unrepentantly gory it is because I think throughout all of this, right, it would have been probably very easy, and I bet you I wouldn't shock me if there was people at the studio saying, you know, we could get even more gross here, box office gross, I should say, if you went down to PG-13. And they never do. And in fact, they just kind of get bloodier and bloodier as they go along. And I respect that, obviously.
Well, it helps because most of the gore is all monster gore. You know, like it's vampires and werewolves and lycans being eviscerated. Rarely, I mean, it's been a while since I rewatched this. I think it's been at least a year or so. But there's not a lot of human gore. Am I correct?
No.
You just rewatched all 5.
There's not a lot of human characters, and I'll talk about that.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, the second movie takes place like immediately after the first. At the end of the first, it's revealed that Victor, played by Bill Nighy, was he was awakened early. He's one of the elder vampires.
Yeah, I love that idea. By the way, can we just briefly talk about that idea?
Because the two, what is it? 2 asleep, 1 awake, or something like that.
Yeah, there's 3 elders who like run the vampires, and what they do is they put 2 of them into like forced comas. And just 1 is always awake, leading everything. And they do it for like a century. Yeah. And then they get put into the coma and they wake up one of them. So at the time of the first movie, Amelia is the elder who is awake. And she is getting ready to go into the coma so that Marcus can be awoken. But Celine, because Victor is like her father figure, she wakes him early, only to find out, spoiler alert, that actually he was the one who slaughtered her family and told her it was lycans. And so that's like a big reveal of the first film.
Yeah. Celine's entire reason for being is based on a lie at this point. So yes, here at the end of Underworld 1, Victor is killed, and then what is it? Is it Michael's blood or whose blood falls into the tomb of Marcus? I can't remember.
It's actually just like a lycan like subordinate that they killed.
That's all
in that
it is,
room.
right?
Yeah, but he knows all the stuff about the truth of like why they're looking for Michael and the experiments on him.
Oh, right, because blood has memories in it. That's another thing.
Yes.
These I love that.
Yes.
That's such a great concept. So blood. So every time that a vampire bleeds somebody or bites them or takes their blood, they get their memories. And almost like their immediate memories too. It's great. They can kind of time travel almost. It's a nice little like time travel-y type of thing. But yeah, so Marcus, the first vampire, breaks free at this point and has all the memories of the first movie and what happened. So he is now on the hunt for Celine and Michael, and also to awaken his brother William, the first werewolf. And he wants to break him free because this is revealed in the past that Victor made a deal with him to capture William, but Marcus always wanted to tame William, his brother that he loved. But Victor imprisoned him forever. That was the whole thing. So Marcus is now, fuck, I gotta get my brother out of here because I love him and I want to tame him. But Victor was like, I'm just gonna fucking keep this guy locked away forever. And it's horrifying.
In case you can't tell, this is where things start to get overly convoluted and complicated. Well, I guess that's true of the first movie, but
I apologize. I apologize, listeners. I really am. I'm trying.
But it's true. You're trying, but it's a whole thing of realizing like you have to kind of like it's weird to say you have to pay attention to Underworld, but it is about how, like, because there's a question mark of, is Marcus going to be good or bad when he comes out, and it's revealed that no, actually he was always waiting for the perfect opportunity to kind of make his play, and now Victor's out of the picture, Amelia's out of the picture, so he's the only elder, and he's going to use this as his final opportunity to get his brother out and kind of like restart all of this, right? Like form a new society. And Michael and Celine seem to be in the way of that. So yeah, it basically is it's a chase movie essentially. It is very much, there's a bunch of chase sequences. Marcus's like vampire form is awesome, and there's like you know, that great moment where he's like, they're on a truck in the roads of Russia, the mountain roads of Russia, and he's attacking them. Like I said, the action is like super bloody this time. This continues they're all going to, but again, it continues the trend of having actors who are like, really? You're in Underworld? Sir Derek Jacobi, a great Shakespearean actor, shows up as in a surprise kind of twist, I suppose. It's revealed that he actually is Alexander Corvinus, the first immortal. He's just always been around kind of watching what his brothers are up to, but never really getting involved, and he becomes part of it. Oh God, the name of the actor who plays Marcus. Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, I do. His name is Tony Curran.
Tony Curran, he's great. He probably sci-fi fans will particularly know him for playing Vincent Van Gogh in an incredible and really beloved episode of Doctor Who. But he's also really good in this. And yeah, this is a really fun one. At the time, I definitely thought this was like an improvement over Underworld, just because it's so action packed, and like I said, it leans more into the B movie cheese, which I appreciated.
Also, other vampire fans will realize that he plays Priest in Blade 2. So,
okay. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Now you say it. Yeah.
He's one of the what are they called again?
I can't remember what they're called.
The Night Stalkers.
That's the Night Stalkers, or what are from the like Ryan Reynolds and
that was
Jessica Biel, aren't they?
But yeah, so Tony Curran is in Blade 2. That's just awesome, and he's a cool character in there. But yeah, you're so right. Evolution is just action packed. Chase movie is a great way to say it. I've never really thought of it that way, but you're right. It is just a chase movie, and oddly enough, Evolution is probably the simplest film.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to, what I mean by that is, I want to go back to what you said earlier. You said that Underworld almost like demands your attention. I think that's a perfect way of saying it, because first of all, a film should demand your attention, number one. But also, I think this one is so, it's almost like the Saw franchise that we love, is that things are revealed in the past, in the future, with every single entry. So you're like, there's like a genuine intrigue and interest to what happens next. The moment that the credits roll on each of these films, I think you do have some genuine intrigue to what is coming. Yeah. And then it makes you also reevaluate some of the stuff that you saw previously. So the Underworld franchise is actually not only is it fun to go through once, but it also is just as fun, even if more fun, going back and watching it again. Because it's rare for a franchise to make you want to rewatch these movies ad nauseum. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather a franchise be schlocky like this, but yet taken so seriously that it's like, hey, watch me again and again. Like, have some fun with this. Like, you should see the amount of YouTube videos that are out there of people that have created the timelines and talked so intricately about the world and this and that. First of all, I don't know if I want to meet these people, but it's hard enough for us to talk about the film, let alone edit together some YouTube videos. So it's just, this one, it demands your attention, but I think in all the positive ways of saying that.
Yeah, I think, we'll talk more in a moment about whether or not the next movie always pays off the end of the last film. It's not always the case. But you're right in that it always, like, the cool thing with a series, and why I think it's important for a series like this, because you said that there's a small but dedicated fan base. That's because there's something rewarding about a series that does remember its mythology and kind of keeps coming back to it with these like reveals. And like I said, I don't know that everything pays off, but by the fifth film, which I just watched yesterday again, you're still getting new reveals about Amelia, the elder who was, just murdered in the first movie. So it's like they are going back and they're like picking up pieces, and that is fun. It makes it feel, for what is just kind of like I said, trash to a certain degree. there's still a level of care of trying to create this world, this mythology that fans can get invested in.
What point did you first realize that this could be a really good franchise?
I didn't. I think the thing is, because we're not based on like a comic book or a book or anything like that, there was never the expectation of that. And really, I think they took such a gamble on everything. At that time, it was much more unusual for a female-led action movie to actually work and for people to, you know, to think that was a good idea. It was a first-time director. It was certainly the first time for me doing anything like this. And so it was one of those things that was like, oh, I guess let's see how this shakes down. And then because there was such a good fan response to it, and I think people really do love an original idea, and it's such a shame that there's almost none of those movies being made anymore. It's really difficult to make that happen. It's been kind of fun every time because there's an open playing field of where we can go with the story.
It's almost like, it's actually surprising to me that there's not more, from what I've seen, like Underworld fan fiction and almost more of a community, because it really seems like the creators are trying to like set that up. You know, they're trying to really create this world that is designed for like role-playing games and video game spin-offs and comic books. And that's the one kind of surprising thing about Underworld, is it never really took off in that realm, which that kind of shocks me.
You're so right about the mythology building, and it should have been more, because now the third entry to the franchise was always planned to be a prequel. So let's flash back in time. And this movie's called Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. So, okay, bear with me again, listeners. It gets a little complicated, but I'm going to do my best. So hundreds and hundreds of years in the past, it is revealed that there are vampires and there are werewolves, like we explained from Alexander Corvinus's, his bloodlines. One gets bit by a bat, one gets bit by a werewolf. And at this point, again, werewolves cannot change into people. Well, magically, for whatever reason, it's because the mom is pregnant, I believe. Yes, there's a pregnant mother who is bit by a werewolf and gives birth to Lucian, played by Michael Sheen. So Lucian is, again, the only werewolf that can change back into a person. And at this point in time, werewolves are slaves to the vampires. And when Victor realizes that Lucian can change back and forth, he starts to get Lucian to breed other lycans, because at this point you can have werewolves, protect them in the day and protect them at night, and then they can basically be like the ultimate slave at this point. Really, that's what it comes down to. And at this point in time, Victor has a daughter played by Rona Mitra. Now, pause this for a second. I remember when this movie was coming out and Kate Beckinsale was not involved. Mm-hmm. And all the marketing was showing Rona Mitra. Yep. She plays Sonia. And I remember everybody being like, oh, so they got like lesser Kate Beckinsale, right? Everybody kept joking around before seeing the film, right? Well, in the movie, it is revealed that Victor always took a liking to Celine, played by Kate Beckinsale, because he was reminded so much of his daughter. So it kind of was like perfect casting. All things considered, right? Now, in the past, Sonia takes a liking to Lucian.
A lichen?
Nice. I was about to say that this movie has a case of prequel lichens, not prequelitis. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that was terrible. And they start having what do you call it? Like a star-crossed love affair, would you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's actually interesting because you mentioned earlier how the kind of easy, dismissive summary of this entire franchise is people always just go, oh, it's Romeo and Juliet with vampires and werewolves. But this is the one that's actually true. You know, like Rise of the Lycans is the Romeo and Juliet movie, not the entire franchise. It's really this one where that comes into play, the third film. Yeah. The forbidden love of Lucian and Sonia.
And Victor doesn't like this, obviously. Just like Romeo and Juliet, what is it? The Montagues and the
Capulets.
You know what?
You uncultured swine.
I was about to say the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. But yes, Victor does not like this. It is revealed that Sonia is pregnant with a potentially hybrid baby. Victor does not like crossing the bloodlines, so Victor actually kills his daughter in front of Lucian. And
in a scene that we actually saw in the first movie, and it's kind of that fun thing where they go back and recreate it here, but now with Rona Mitra.
Totally.
And I'm actually surprised to this day, that they never went back and CGI'd her into the first movie. Like a special edition.
Well, this isn't a Disney product.
It's true.
Yeah. They actually hold their their cinema in high regard, the Underworld franchise. So yes, at this point, Lucian is fucking pissed and kind of vows that there will always be an endless war of vampires and lycans, and then he goes to kind of create more and more lycans, and then Underworld begins, right? So that's the kind of the long history of it. I guess we can say our feelings on this one right now. This is where I fell off.
Yep.
This is where I fell off, and you know, there's fun to be had in this one, but it is sorely missing Kate Beckinsale. I think that is a big problem. As much as Michael Sheen and Bill Nighy are front and center in this film, which is honestly kind of a surprise, and it's awesome to see, especially on revisit of this one. But I think this is the true cash grab. This is the cash grab movie of the 5. I feel like this explains stuff that doesn't need to be explained, or at least it shows stuff that was already explained.
Yeah, that's my issue with it. I kind of, you know me, you know that I'm not a prequel guy. Yeah. I always have my defenses up against prequels in general, and this movie kind of summarizes why. Because it's just showing us a feature-length version of stuff that was perfectly covered in the first movie.
Totally.
We don't need it expanded to 90 minutes. We got it. We got it when Lucian told us about it and saw the brief flashback. And so it feels unnecessary, other than giving Bill Nighy and Michael Sheen like their kind of swan song of the series, letting them go out as the stars, which, like you said, is cool, and they're both good in this, and it's especially cool to see Michael Sheen. Maybe that was it, right? Maybe like when Len Wiseman took Kate, he was like, "Well, I'll let you star in the 3rd movie." He's like, "All right, you know, if I get a lead role out of this." But yeah, so it's got the prequel problem of like it feels unnecessary, and then we don't like to shit talk actors, but Rona Mitra in this, I mean, this is kind of the proof that beauty isn't enough. You know, like. It's not even that she's like actively bad, but like you said, she just doesn't have the same spark as Kate Beckinsale.
No.
So the fact that she's beautiful to look at, but I don't buy into her in Lucian's romance the same way, because she's just kind of like flattened the performance aspect here. Yeah.
Again, there's a certain spark to Kate Beckinsale in every role she takes, and this one, it does. It is Kate Beckinsale light. And you know, again, it goes back to what we were saying when everybody saw the posters and the marketing. You know, it works thematically, but there's this charm that Rona Mitra doesn't have, and that's unfortunate. And it's not saying something's totally bad about her, but
she's actually, to be nice for a second, she's much better in another fun trash action movie, Neil Marshall's Doomsday, which is like his Mad Max ripoff. Yeah, she's much better in that.
Yeah, I like that movie quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the problem, ultimately, to sum this up, I think the problem with Rise of the Lycans is that for it to work, it needed to have at least one big reveal that really changed everything about the first 2 movies, like the way we looked at them, right? Like some new piece of information that was like, oh my God, wow, okay, that completely changes our understanding of mythology, and it doesn't. Instead, it's just filling in the blanks of what it already told you. Yeah. And that's like the worst kind of prequel. If you're not going to give us a surprise reveal, then why bother putting this much effort into it? Like, why bother making a $36 million movie to just give us an expanded version of a scene you already showed us?
It's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Underworld series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just gives you everything you already knew, doesn't do it in any fun way, and then where you end is exactly where you began.
Yep. Well, and that probably explains why we get to where we do with the next film. There was because as you said, this is kind of when we did the Saw episode, we talked about how when Dunstan and Melton came on as the writers, they were kind of faced with, Jigsaw being killed off in the 3rd film, and like where do you go from there? Mm-hmm. And obviously, Underworld has the same issue now, where even though Rise of the Lycans I don't think was like as big of a hit as the first 2, it did well enough to continue the series. But as you said, it was always designed as a trilogy. You've kind of like wrapped up that initial story. Where do we go now? And honestly, Underworld Awakening in 2012 is a pretty surprising departure from the original movies in terms of like what it does with the mythology. So Kate Beckinsale does come back. Scott Speedman does not. We should mention too that Underworld Rise of the Lycans was the first one not directed by Len Wiseman. It was directed by Patrick Tatopoulos, who was actually the special effects guy on the first 2. Like the guy who created the Lycans and the designs and everything. So they allowed him to direct the 3rd one. Underworld Awakening in 2012 was directed by a Swedish directing team of Mans Marland and Bjorn Stein. So they take over. This is, you look at the screenwriting, you start to be like a little bit worried because it's got 4 credited writers: Len Wiseman, John Hlavin, Alison Burnett, and J. Michael Straczynski, which that's kind of cool. He's a very well-known author and sci-fi writer. Created Babylon 5, so it's cool they brought him in.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, at the end of evolution, we should probably mention that Selene was given Alexander Corvinus's blood. She was allowed to drink of his blood, and it gave her new powers. She was like, now she is extra strong, extra powerful, and could exist in the sunlight. She's a daywalker now. Mm-hmm. And then she's still with Michael, who is of course the hybrid. And the end of that movie kind of insinuated that we're now on the run because we've upset both the lycans and the vampires. Everyone's going to be after us now. And so you assume that that's where Underworld Awakening will pick up, right? Nope. Instead, in a very bizarre decision that I know both of us want to talk about, in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, we get a big exposition dump from Selene, which is kind of like here's what happened in between the movies, revealing that finally, after decades and hundreds of years of this war, humanity finally discovered that vampires and werewolves exist. And so began something called the Purge, where humans started to fight back and eliminate vampires and werewolves. And it's like this really interesting montage showing them, going to people's homes and, doing tests on them to see if they're vampires. And if they are, just pulling them out into the daylight, hunting down lycans in the sewers. And so Selene and Michael are, suddenly less invested in the war. And suddenly now, it's just a matter of survival. Mm-hmm. And they need to get away. So they have this plan to get on this ship and go off to like an island somewhere. But they are kind of ambushed by humans. And they are separated, and Selene is knocked unconscious. When she wakes up in a strange facility. She breaks out. She realizes she's in a pharmaceutical company for some reason in their headquarters. And she fights her way out and comes to discover that I think it's like, I can't remember how many years. Like
it's 12 years.
12 years. Okay, 12 years have passed since she was knocked out. She has no idea where Michael is. But she starts having these flashes, and she learns that someone else broke out at the same time as her, and she's having flashes seeing through their eyes, and she assumes it's Michael. She's thinking, well, we have some kind of connection, clearly, because of our love. It turns out, instead, that actually the flashes she's seeing are from another test subject who is a young girl, looks to be about 12 years old, and she seems to be a hybrid. Do you see where I'm going with this, folks? Do you get it?
It's her cousin.
Yeah, it's her cousin, of course. No, obviously she was not aware that she was pregnant from her and Michael hooking up, and the baby has grown up to be a new being called Eve. And so the ultimate kind of thrust of this movie is that her and Eve are on the run. They end up hooking up with a new male lead, David, played by Theo James, who is the son of. Okay, this is going to get complicated here. He's the son of the head of the last remaining vampire coven. Because at this point, vampires are almost entirely wiped out, and werewolves are pretty much near extinction. That's the idea. Mm-hmm. And the one remaining vampire coven that we know of has gone underground. They are now living in the sewers. They're like a shadow of what they used to be. And the head of that coven is played by the great Charles Dance. Again, continuing our trend of awesome actors coming in and giving it their all. And Charles Dance is the leader of this coven, and David is his son, and always meant to take over eventually. But David ends up helping Selene and Eve, and ultimately the dramatic thrust of this movie is we discover that pharmaceutical company is actually run by lycans, and they are trying to use Eve's blood to create, make themselves all into hybrids and kind of repopulate the lycan race. I'll just say this really quickly before we talk about our general thoughts on the film. Mm-hmm. One thing I always thought was weird about that decision, I know we're going to talk about the time jump and the whole purge thing as one aspect. I also think there's something very strange how coming off of a prequel, which was kind of dedicated to reminding you that actually the werewolves were the victims in all of this, it's really weird that Awakening is just oh, by the way, the lycans are the bad guys again.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that's a strange reset for me as well. But let's just talk about our general thoughts about the movie here.
Yeah, this movie goes back to the B movie action of it all, especially. So that's the positive coming off of Rise of the Lycans, where that one becomes more again Shakespearean type of thing.
Yeah, it's trying to be fantasy. Yeah,
totally, and that's why I left that franchise after Rise of the Lycans. Now Trev was the one that said, "Hey, come back, watch Awakening, and have a good time." So yes, there is a lot of fun to be had here. There's a super lycan who becomes this giant big monster. It is fun. And it's great to see Kate back. There's nothing like seeing Kate back in this movie. You can tell she just gets right back into those leather pants, and she's like she never left. Yeah. But it commits that unforgivable sin of dropping the most interesting stuff set up in the beginning. And I think for it to say that humanity knows and then hand wave, the biggest hand wave of all time, and say 12 years later. I think that is so frustrating about this movie, is that I think the whole time you're sitting there being like, okay, I'm having fun. There's a giant lycan. Celine's back. There's a little kid with some hybrid powers. And, ooh, the lycans are back to being evil. Charles Dance is here. Okay. Where's Michael? There's also that little mystery. But again, the entire movie for 88 minutes or whatever it is, you're thinking, I want to see that prologue shit.
It's kind of surprising how much it dropped, because like you said, like in terms of what it sets up, it doesn't give The Purge. Like The Purge really should have been its own movie. I know both of you and I agreed with that. Like basically what Awakening is should have been Underworld 5. Yeah. Underworld 4 should have been the montage at the beginning expanded to feature length. Yeah. But beyond that, also like I said, the tease at the end of Evolution of Celine can walk in daylight now ends up meaning nothing. Like there's one scene in this where she walks in the daylight, and it's just like she walks up to a building in the sun. Totally. And that's it. Like that doesn't pay off in any like significant way. Removing Michael after like getting us invested in them as a couple. The one time we see Michael in this movie at the beginning, it's not even Scott Speedman. It's like a pretty bad body double. Yeah. And then he's just like missing for the rest of the movie. And as you said, that's like setting up a mystery, but then we'll talk about where that mystery goes in the next one. So yeah, it has its positives, as you said. I actually think it's a very, very fun movie if you go into it understanding that this is like Awakening and Blood Wars, the fifth one, are really almost like almost a different series. Yeah. Where it's like, well, okay, now we're unapologetically B-movie nonsense at this point. And Awakening, I think, really leans into that. I also I don't know how you feel about him. I actually really like Theo James as David in these. Yeah, I think he kind of steps up, and I know there was even rumors at the time about him maybe taking the series over, like going on with him and without Kate Beckinsale, and I was actually down for that. I think he's a pretty capable lead, and I think David is, a decent enough character. So yeah, it is a very fun movie. It's just, and we should say too, this one was like a surprise mega success. So the first Underworld had a worldwide gross of 96 million. Underworld Evolution had 111. Rise of the Lycans did 91. That's better than I even thought. But Underworld Awakening 160 million. This one was like a shocking hit, and part of that was the 3D bump. And I will say, you didn't see the theater, but this was a great 3D movie. The 3D was awesome. But yeah, I'm just surprised, and it had a higher budget too, so I guess you have to factor that in. But still, a really big hit, which was, I think that was seen at the time as like, oh my God, people actually do care about this Underworld series. Definitely. And that also spoke to Kate Beckinsale, right? The fact that she came back, and it felt like people were happy to see her back after the Rona Mitra entry.
I totally understand why this was the success it was. You nailed it by saying, especially the 3D bump and then the waiting for Kate to come back. But I think it's as you always say, and we're about to talk about Blood Wars, the capper to the franchise. And
for now,
yeah. But you have said in the past, the next movie's gross is representative of what came before, right? And I think this one doing 160, obviously that makes sense, is that we were waiting. And then the next movie does 81 million worldwide. So obviously it does half. So it shows you that people were happy to see Kate back and all, but it definitely didn't scratch the itch that I think people wanted. And I think people were mad that they didn't get that prologue stuff. I'm so with you with your commentary on the lycans being humanized, in the previous film, but then in this one going to just mustache twirling villains again. Yeah. And I think you're so right. I never thought of it that way, but I feel like that reveal should have never happened. It should have just been the humans. Like, you set up this plague, why not just keep it being the humans the whole time that are trying to eradicate everybody? Like, there's really no reason. I guess thematically, it breaks the franchise. So I wonder what their thought process was, that just to get some more lycan action? That must be the only reason, right?
Yeah, I think they looked at it. I mean, to be fair, they do their best to make up for it by having the head lycan here be played by the great Stephen Ray. So again, another actor who is like, really, you're doing Underworld? But I'm sure he's having fun. But yeah, I'm assuming that they just looked at what they had set up with Rise of the Lycans and somebody involved, because at this point, really, the creative powers behind it. Len Wiseman's always the producer, but you can see new writers coming on. Yeah. And it's always kind of a question of how do we keep the series going? I'm sure there was just somebody there who said, well, this started as vampires versus werewolves. We got to get it back to that. That's like the heart of this series. So we have to have the werewolves be the villains here, or the antagonists. And yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Like, I think even if you did your idea and it was the humans, you'd still have to have werewolves in there as some kind of element. Maybe just have like a single bad werewolf who's working with them or something. But I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And to be fair, I don't want to sound like I'm negative, because this movie is a blast to watch. Because as you said, it's only 88 minutes. The action is like pretty awesome. It's ridiculous, and it's maybe the most singular Underworld movie because it is the only one that spends a lot of time kind of outside of the visual trappings that were set up in the first movie of like the old school kind of covens and everything. This one is like, played out in like pharmaceutical high tech buildings. It's like the future, not too much of the future, but it has a slightly different vibe to it that I actually appreciate, because it feels like an oddity in the series. Totally. And yeah, you get to see Kate Beckinsale fight a giant werewolf, and that's awesome.
Yeah, that part is the highlight. And she fights him multiple times, which is great. Yeah.
There's also, spoiler alert, there's a great death in this too. Like the way she kills like the main, like not the main bad guy, but the second main bad guy. He's been taking the blood that they've gotten from, like the hybrid blood, which is making him stronger, making him like very powerful. He's like a bigger lycan than usual, and he heals very fast. Mm-hmm. And I just want to single out the moment where Kate Beckinsale like punches basically a hole in his stomach, and then pulls her hand out, and he says like, I heal almost immediately now. And she's like, I'm counting on it. And then he realizes that what she actually did was put a grenade inside his stomach. It's
awesome.
And now his stomach has healed and he can't get it out and he blows up. Come on, that's great. Like this is why we like Underworld.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So moving on to the fifth and tentatively final installment. It's called Underworld Blood Wars, but we should mention that this was almost planned as a reboot.
Yes.
They called it tentatively Underworld Next Generation. Because they were, I think Kate Beckinsale's weird. Can we just stop for a second?
Well, actually, let's put a button on that and let's talk about this afterwards, because because it's a bigger conversation. But we'll say this is one of the many times where they weren't sure if Kate Beckinsale would come back, and we'll explain that. We'll explain that afterwards.
Okay,
so, yes.
But you take it away. Explain to me and the listeners Blood Wars.
Yes. Well, okay. So as I said, this really started another trend, and this is true of Resident Evil as well. This is another comparison point between those two series. Resident Evil did the same thing, where every time Resident Evil would like set up something for the next movie, the beginning of the next movie would like eliminate that setup in like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it just go off and do its own thing. And so at the end of Underworld Awakening, we learned that Michael was also held captive in the same facility, but he has broken out and he's on the loose. And Eve and I believe Eve and Celine can both like see like through his eyes, like she can with Eve.
Yeah.
And Celine basically says, we're not only going to find Michael, but we're going to like reclaim this Earth, which is also weird because that seems like after her not being invested in the war, now it's almost like that movie ends on a threat of Celine being like, fuck you humans, we're coming to kill all of you. It's like the first time they're like presented as kind of like, we should be looking at them as villains, right?
Yeah, like sinister.
But anyways, Blood Wars disregards all that by starting and telling us that actually Celine told Eve, that her daughter that she's now accepted and, has feelings for, she's told her to leave and to not come back because she's worried that if the lycans capture her, they will continue doing to her what they planned and using her blood to create a new race of hybrids. So she's told Eve to leave. So Eve is like not a factor in this movie. And in fact, Celine is just trying to like go underground. She just wants nothing to do with any of this anymore. But she's still getting chased by like the remaining lycans, and even still the vampires who are still mad at her for the events of the first two films. She is attacked and almost captured by some lycans, and David shows back up and saves her again. Who we should mention too, David like died in the previous movie, but she brought him back to life with her blood, which showed that she still has magic blood. Right? So when in the course of this, it's revealed that there is another remaining vampire coven, because why not? And the leader of that coven, Samira, is dealing with the fact that the werewolves have started to make a comeback. Yes, we were told in the previous movie that they were like almost near extinction, but for some reason now there's a bunch of them again. And they have a new leader, Marius, who's basically like the new Lucian, essentially. He is a leader who's like rallied them and has like helped them like make a giant comeback, and they're starting to like really make inroads to finally wipe out the vampires. And Samira is worried about this. So even though she signed a death warrant for Celine, which means all vampires should be looking for Celine to kill her, she says, no, let's actually invite Celine back and have her train our next generation of death dealers. We need her help at this point. And so Celine kind of reluctantly agrees to come back and start training the death dealers. But because it's an Underworld movie, spoiler, it turns out this is all a setup. Samira is actually looking to kill Celine. David and his dad, once again played by Charles Dance, agreed to help her. And basically, I mean, this is a complicated one to kind of summarize. I know I'm flailing here, but there's a lot of twists and turns in this one. Celine and David end up going on the run and going to the Nordic Coven, which is a obviously snow-covered coven that, whereas all the vampires wear black leather in the covens we've seen before, they all wear white leather in the Nordic Coven. This also leads to like one of my favorite things in any movie ever, where they go to the Nordic Coven and they say like, should we be worried about lycans? And they're like, oh no, lycans have never made an attack on the Nordic Coven because they can't stand the cold. Cut to like 10 minutes later, and the lycans show up just all wearing winter coats. It's like, oh no, they figured it out. But yes, at the Nordic Coven, we discovered that this is like a much more like supernatural, spiritual coven, who actually do this thing where the vampires, they will like bring them very close to death and then kind of like wrap them in these bandages and put them in water and freeze them, and it takes you to like over to the other side, and when you come back, you have enhanced powers. And that happens to Celine, because what would an Underworld movie be if we didn't keep giving Celine more and more powers and making her more unstoppable?
Yep.
Anyways, what this is all leading to is, as I said, so we have two villains in this. We have Samira, who is the kind of ambitious vampire who wants to take over the entire vampire society and needs to get all the other elders out of the way to do so. And we have Marius, the new lycan leader. And the big reveal of this movie at the end is that Marius is actually the one who captured Michael after he escaped from the facility in the previous film. And guess what, folks? If you were waiting for Scott Speedman to come back, I got some bad news for you, because it's revealed that Marius actually just killed Michael, drained him of his blood, and has been drinking it to make himself stronger and have hybrid powers. And Celine obviously finds this out, is heartbroken, and so battles Marius to the death. So yeah, this is another one where it like kind of just dumps a lot of what's set up in the last one and feels like it's trying to get the series kind of back again to like what the first film was, with a more clear-cut lycans versus vampire war. It's also the only Underworld movie that I'm aware of that has no human characters. And in fact, I mentioned this in the review I wrote for it on Letterboxd back in the day, and I watched it again and I can confirm they never even like mention humans in this movie. Like, you could watch this movie and think that humans are extinct. Like, it's just, it seems like it's just lycans and vampires now.
Which is so funny because, again, coming off of Awakening, being like humans have now taken up the mantle of destroying these monsters, monstrous warring factions. And in this movie, he's like, again, never mind.
Yeah. So if you're asking me, is that all negative? I mean, perhaps, but does this movie also have a scene where Kate Beckinsale rips a guy's spine out? Yeah. And a moment where David holds up the villain's decapitated head to show to all his underlings? Yeah. So guess what? It still rules. Yeah. No, it's awesome. I like this one quite a bit. I think what makes this one, and we'll get to the ranking, but obviously I'm going to tell you, this is above Awakening for me. And I think because the storylines that this one drops, I am prepped for that already. I think I'm like ready for this thing to drop plot points, but also dropping Eve is totally fine by me. I don't care about watching my superhero protagonist go on an adventure with their young child. I just don't care. And especially in my Underworld movie. So throwing Eve to the side, whatever. And then also Awakening already made me content with not showing the humans anyways. So Blood War's not showing them. I was like, whatever. Just get back to what I like, which is lycans v vampires. Plus, you get blonde Beckinsale. Love that. She looks great. She gets these super cool powers where she's like lightning speed. She's like the Flash all of a sudden, which is hilarious. Her eyes don't they go like white or something, if I remember correctly? Yeah. So she looks awesome in this movie, and especially when she's all in her like white leather and stuff. She's cool. Like, and I know I'm talking about like characterization and stuff like that in the Underworld series, so bear with me. But I like that after Charles Dance was presented as such an asshole in the previous one, I like that his character has like a little bit of redemption here and kind of becomes good, and shows that he does care about David. I think this is a better movie for David also. I think like Theo James is better in this one, or at least just given more to do. So
this is where you feel good about him taking over if he does.
Yeah, or even like you were just saying how you don't care about Eve and Celine together, and I agree with that. I think I was always down for like a movie with just Eve, right? Because she was clearly set up to be the Celine replacement, and I think that would be fine. But if you have Celine there, then it might be a little crowded to have them both. So I could see a movie with like David and Eve together, if Kate Beckinsale did really decide to finally jump ship once and for all.
And I think where this ends is very cool too, because it now sets up Celine as the new vampire elder. And I think that's just a great spot for her character arc to take. Starts as a, death dealer that has sworn an oath of destruction and mayhem based on a lie, and has kind of fought her way through and survived all of these new eras of whatever's going on, humans or otherwise, to finally make her way to the top of the food chain here.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very cool to end here.
Yeah, because it even ends with a very brief, it shows her and Eve reuniting very briefly,
yes,
and then goes to credits. So if this does end up being the end of it all, it's a fine ending. You can walk away here and be satisfied.
I agree. Yeah. So let's talk about that then. This quote unquote ends the franchise. I do a lot of checks for interviews and stuff, and maybe some sound clips that I like to drop into the edit of these podcasts. And I just thought maybe I could find a lot of Kate, talking about her most iconic character and basically the thing that got her career where it is. Kate is strange. And again, we love her. We really, really do. She seems like a really cool person. But she seems to always want to distance herself from this franchise. And it's very strange to me. Because you mentioned the connection of the Resident Evil movies, and again, one day we will talk about them. We did some theme months about Mila Jovovich's movies, so definitely check your podcast feed and go down the list. But Mila seems way more excited to be remembered for Resident Evil, where Kate likes to say, what were those movies again?
If they do want to continue Celine's story or find a way to continue it, is that something you'd want to keep doing and keep putting the cutscene back on?
I mean, the thing is, we always have gone on a kind of a case-by-case basis, and the thing is, if obviously if there's not an audience for it, we certainly don't need to keep throwing things out there. And it just sort of depends on where, I've never really, I've not been sort of attached to it before, the concept has come up. So it's really kind of depends if it seems like there's, another place to go, but then I guess we go.
She's got the the Daniel Craig. You know what people say about Daniel Craig and Bond, where they've oh, Daniel Craig hates Bond, and that's never really true. It's just that people always ask him how he feels right after he gets done filming one, and he's exhausted, and he's like, I don't want to even think about the next one. They're like, oh my god, he hates playing Bond, and it's just he has a more complicated relationship with it. I would say that's true with her. She's a complicated relationship with it, but she is even more so, often very dismissive of this series. Yeah. And I guess I kind of get it to a certain point, because we should mention, throughout the course of the series, she does divorce Len Wiseman, and so it's actually kind of surprising, because I think by the time you get to Awakening and Blood Wars, they're not together anymore. So she's now working with her ex as the producer. I suppose it is a testament to both of them that they are willing to keep that going and keep that working relationship alive. But maybe that's part of it. Let's just say it. We said she's cool, we like her, but it is pretty clear that she thinks this series is a little below her, I think. Yeah. And I think she always looks at it as, every time she comes back, I feel like she has that attitude of I guess I got to do another one of these to keep myself relevant. That's the sense I get. It's to be fair, she never shows it on screen, right? She never phones it in, and she does the work. She, you can tell she does all the training for the actions and the stunts and everything. And she's, certainly given the same level performance every time. But I think she's always this is a calculated business decision more than this is a character I love and want to keep going.
It was a very life-changing role for me, personally as well, so I feel very affectionate towards it. And it was, it's exciting to be able to follow a character over such a long period of time. It's rare to get that chance.
Totally. That's a great way of putting it. It definitely feels like Kate is going back to the well when she comes back to this franchise. And she knows it, but she doesn't act that way, which is great. Yeah.
It's even true today, right? Because after Blood Wars kind of underperformed and didn't do as well as Awakening, it kind of put the kibosh in the franchise for a while. We said there hasn't been one since, and there hasn't even really been much movement towards another one. And I know she was kind of immediately, again, after Blood Wars, but she also been like this with Awakening. But she was like, yeah, I think I'm done. I'm not going to do anymore. And then I think it was last year, she was profiled in GQ or Vanity Fair or something, and she was suddenly yeah, I still got the outfit. If they called me, I'd listen. And you think, well, what's happened that time? And it's that she's had a bunch of movies that did not take off, And I think that's the story of Kate Beckinsale's career. Is like we said, nothing besides Underworld really ever blows up for her. Mm-hmm. And so I think because that keeps happening, she goes off and does something what was that dumb Amazon Prime movie Jolt or whatever. Nothing takes off in that realm. So I think Now she's more willing to come back because she probably could use it again. You know,
Totally.
her career could use another Underworld.
Yeah, like obviously, me and you both would love more of these movies. So if anytime Kate wants to come back, that's great. I don't know if I want to see them without her. It would really, really depend. I don't know if I want to reboot either. You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of want to see her in the role. I want to see more adventures of Celine, especially since Kate Beckinsale, the actress, is immortal as well. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I want, and I'll talk about it at the end here because I told you I have like a pitch, but.
Okay. But let's talk about the things that never happened. While they were making this franchise, there was 3 separate occasions. One being, well, yeah, I would say one being my favorite, and maybe yours as well, but we'll see. But let's flash back in time to the year 2014, where there was a little film called I, Frankenstein, which will be a future F2F movie. But the film was another work by Kevin Grevioux, the co-creator of the Underworld franchise. And it was teased that Celine was going to be a post-credit scene of that film. It never materialized, obviously, but it was definitely planned and talked about and kind of reached out to Kate Beckinsale. It never came to fruition. That one, I haven't seen I, Frankenstein. I will one day, but I have no real thoughts on that crossover. How about you?
Well, I don't want to spoil my thoughts on I, Frankenstein already, but I'll just say this: I have seen it, and I'm quite happy that crossover didn't happen.
Okay, good. Okay.
So you take of that what you will, but yeah.
Now, there's 2 crossovers that potentially could happen. One being my favorite and hugely missed opportunity. And Trev, we'll see what he agrees with. But in 2016, there was almost a Blade crossover. Bringing back Wesley Snipes, keeping Kate Beckinsale in the loop. Those 2 franchises coming together because we didn't even say this, but Kevin Grevioux in a later interview a few years ago had said that he actually named this character Celine after a Marvel Comics character of the same name. Surprisingly, was never sued.
Well, they're not very similar characters. So.
Oh, they're not. Okay.
No.
But regardless, Wesley Snipes' Blade movie with Kate Beckinsale, like, oh my god, like I would be over the moon. How about you?
I don't hate the idea. I think it would have been fun. You know, we should say it didn't happen because that's around the same time Marvel got Blade back, and so that kind of put the kibosh on those rights and the talk of it. But this will probably not surprise you. It's the other crossover that almost happened that would have been my favorite. Yeah. So you're a Blade Underworld guy. That's fine. I would have certainly been there opening weekend. Don't get me wrong. But the other one that almost happened, which kills me, because while these 2 series were going, I was always advocating for this. I'm sure you even remember that. Like I was like, why are they not doing this? Because I even mentioned earlier that they both came from the same studio. In 2016, producer David Kern did confirm that there, at least at one point, there were talks of a crossover with Resident Evil. Yeah. And that to me is like the no-brainer. Because if you were Sony Screen Gems and you had both these series going at the same time and they're both profitable, they're both clearly speaking to the same audience. In recent years, even still to this day, there's all this discussion about female-led action movies, right? And how they don't do as well. You even have Jennifer Lawrence saying they never existed. I know that was like, I know she was dumb and she just misspoke, but still, it's funny. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But not enough credit is ever given to the fact that throughout this period, like the late aughts and into the 2010s, Milla Jovovich and Kate Beckinsale were both leading very successful action franchises.
Yes. Yeah.
Like Resident Evil made like $1 billion. Underworld did very well. And people were going to see them because of Beckinsale and Jovovich. And those series, like I said, they definitely have the same fan bases, I think. And so because they're so fantasy based and because all it would take is saying, oh my God, Umbrella created something that ripped a hole in the universe and Alice has been dumped into the Underworld universe. Like that's all, we don't need it to be smart. We just want to see Milla Jovovich and Kate Beckinsale kicking ass together. Yeah. And the fact that they didn't do that is like mind-boggling. I know Mila would have been down. I think Beckinsale would have been the harder sell on that. Yeah. But still, I would have loved it.
This franchise and Resident Evil are obviously 2 of the biggest, long-lasting female franchises out there right now. If Celine and Alice ever went head-to-head, who do you think would win in the fight?
My goodness, that's an interesting one. They're both the same studio, so I can't even say me. It'd be a very close thing. And then hopefully they could just be friends. Yeah.
So, end it with a handshake.
Yeah, commiserate over their tight black trousers.
And again, obviously, I would love this. But the only reason I would say that I would put Blade ahead of this one is because I don't want me and you both dying of heart attacks watching that film.
Yeah.
So we would survive the Blade crossover, but
That's true,
we would be dead in the seats for that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, one other thing that never happened, which has always been talked about for years now, is Len Wiseman has talked about TV series a lot and trying to get the Underworld universe to grow. It just goes back to what you were saying about like, board games and mythologies and role playing and just video games. Like the Underworld world is rife of great storytelling and nothing's come from it, which is a shame. Not even like comic books. Which is strange, hey? Like, that's a weird one, too. Like, why is there not like a long-running Underworld comic book?
I'll just say it now. That's where, like, I alluded to this earlier, but that to me is where the future of Underworld should be.
Yeah.
I don't think the market exists anymore for it to come back as a theatrical entry. It's just not a big enough franchise, that we've seen, even since the last one, which isn't that long, ultimately. But from 2016 to now, we've seen the theatrical marketplace entirely change, and these mid-budget franchises can't exist anymore. The Underworld can't exist against the big boys. It's not going to get any screens when you have Star Wars and Marvel and Fast and Furious and Jurassic Park and shit dominating, right?
Yeah.
So Underworld really needs to kind of retreat to TV, I think, especially after the underperformance of Blood Wars. And I think that's fine. I think a streaming series of Underworld would be fine. I'd be down for it. And actually, I just threw together like a couple notes about what I would like to see in it. I think one important thing to do it would be that it needs to be. So we never mentioned like the visual look of the Underworld movies. We mentioned that they're obviously very Matrix influenced, black leather, those kind of action scenes. But it's also one of those things that's like color corrected to have always like a blue-gray scale.
Yeah.
I think it'd really be cool if in the Underworld show, anytime you cut to like the human world, you did like you remove that color correction and you save that color correction for any scenes about lycans and vampires. And like the human world was always shown to be very colorful and bright.
Like Matrix, like the green hue and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
totally.
And I think what I would do for the show is this is all dependent on who would be willing to come back and everything. But I think for me, the show would work best as having it be about like, same continuity, pick up years after Blood Wars. And we're back to the idea that as far as humanity knows, the vampires and werewolves are like gone, right? There hasn't been any sightings. Like they've just at a certain point they were happy to let them like destroy themselves. They didn't have to worry about the purge anymore, and they think it's no longer a problem. And our main character could be like a human cop or special agent, whatever, investigating a murder that ultimately seems like it somehow ties into this like world of vampires and lycans. And in the course of that, he ends up meeting and ultimately working with Eve. I would have Eve be the new main character, like get an actress, like an older actress to play her. And if Theo James is down to come back, and I haven't seen him recently, I don't know if he still looks kind of the same, but I think you could also bring David in and have him be kind of a main character. But ultimately, what I'd like the show to be about is revealing, and this shouldn't shock you, that like I like them to finally pay off things that I feel like they dropped the ball on. There'd be some kind of reveal that whoever your villains are, whether it's like a government organization or whatever, they actually have Michael. Like the reveal could be that Michael has survived, right? Like that's something about his abilities. He didn't die from being completely drained. His blood kind of repopulated, and they've been using him in the same way. And I do think you could get Scott Speedman. I'm going to go on a limb and say Scott Speedman would do this because, like, why? It would be like a nice kind of comeback for him, right?
Totally.
And have this first season be about them freeing Michael and Eve kind of being like not even reunited because they've never met each other, but like that relationship of the two, and like have the main trio of characters be Eve, Michael, and this human character. And then what I would like is if she's down for it, I think the best thing you could do is have the end of the first season be a tease of like, where is Celine? Right.
Yeah.
Kind of reveal that she's kind of, again, she's vanished. She's retreated from this war. She's kind of taken herself off the grid, but like show like a final scene that's like the next target, right? We have to go find her now. And if she was willing to come back, obviously make her a big part of the second season. So I think Underworld would do well on TV still. I think that's probably the right direction for it.
Well, Netflix execs, if you're listening, make sure to cancel that after 2 seasons.
Yeah,
and,
that's true. Yeah.
And also never get to fruition of that finale.
Yeah, and barely promote it too while you're at it.
No, that honestly sounds awesome. I would. Yeah. I mean, of course, I would watch more Underworld all the time. I definitely. But I just want it in the continuity. Like as dumb the continuity is with this franchise, I think it's smart to keep Eve on the hunt for Michael or something. Mm-hmm. I think that's very good. I would watch that for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, you always want to pay off the fans who have stuck with it.
Totally.
Like keep rewarding them and saying like, we still are listening, we still care, and we can still go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ultimate like proof that works, and I know it's a more successful series, but the Chucky TV show that's on right now is still continuing the exact same continuity of the movies, right? And it's like that's going back into the 80s now, and Don Mancini has maintained the same continuity, and that's pretty impressive. And Underworld could try to aim for the same thing.
Totally. Well, let's wrap this up here. Let's throw our rankings out. We've talked really in depth about the films. I hope that people listening have seen them. If not, I hope we got you interested in how insane they are, and go witness this for yourself instead of us bumbling our retellings of it. We're just honestly we were very excited to talk about this episode. I think our success to series are such a nice break from some of the stuff that we watch and we are let down by, or for one reason or another. But I think the success episodes are they're just nice breathers for me and you, and sometimes we just feel elated at this moment to talk about them. So I'll go quickly down mine. My ranking is I still like the first one the most, for just setting up the world, and it got me interested in the world, the mythology. I think this next one is Underworld Evolution. They are a great double feature. I think they are equal, almost on the number one spot for me. But yeah, 1 and 2 are my 1 and 2. Then the next one, I'd throw Blood Wars in there. I think it is a satisfying conclusion to the series. Awakening is next, which again was fun, but it has its flaws. And then right at the bottom has got to be Rise of the Lycans. I just think it's completely unnecessary. Has some fun, has some good performances, but just you never really need to watch that one. So that's why I think I put it on the bottom. I love the series, and I'll continue rewatching them for as long as I can. But yeah, that's my ranking. How about you?
Cool. Slightly different here, but not ultimately that much different. My number 1 is still Underworld Evolution, the second one. I just find that to be like the most, it's like I said, it's the bloodiest, it's the most action packed, good just chase movie. My number 2 actually is Awakening.
Really?
Especially this rewatch, like I said, I'm very aware of the flaws, but you kind of nailed it on the head when you said it's only 88 minutes. It's like it's 88 minutes. It's like 88 minutes of just like B movie, like nonsense fun. So I kind of dig that one a bit. It's like a really fun, just like blast of nonsense and trash. Sure. My third is the original Underworld. I like that one still quite a bit, but I would probably prefer to watch Awakening just because it's so much shorter. Number four is Blood Wars, and then number 5 is Rise of Lycans. And I'll even say this, Chris, I'll throw a little wrinkle in the mix here. Number 6 is Underworld Endless War, the 18-minute anime that was made. That I don't know if you even know this or ever watched it. No. Completely pointless. It was made as like a little it was like made as a little promotional tool for Awakening. It's like around the same. Do you remember that like weird trend in Hollywood where they did that all the time, right? Like Van Helsing, the Nolan Batman movies, Pitch Black. I'm sure I'm missing. Oh, The Matrix obviously probably kicked this off. The Animatrix. There was a lot of these like little quick animated like tie-ins, and the Underworld one. It's only 18 minutes, and honestly, don't waste your time. They couldn't even get Kate Beckinsale to sit in a recording booth for like 5 minutes, and it's like a different person playing Celine. It's bad.
Yeah, no. I love when we do our rankings at the end of these success ones because they're always different, but yet we have the same exuberance for the franchise, which is again, it's such a testament to such a great franchise, and that's what our main show, Failure to Franchise, is kind of about. It's about showing like why don't these franchises work, and I think Underworld works for successful world building, interesting history, just you're so excited to see what happens next, and then an awesome main character. It just keeps you coming back for more, and it doesn't really matter. The rankings never really matter with a great franchise, I think.
Well, and it's like the perfect kind of franchise for us to celebrate because of what we mentioned at the beginning. It's pretty clear why Bond is successful, or why Indiana Jones or The Matrix or Rocky or something like that does well, right? But Underworld is a series that we acknowledge is on its face kind of dumb, right? It's honestly you could look at the first Underworld, and there's a universe where that first Underworld didn't hit, and we are covering that movie on our show, on our regular show, right? So what is it about this one? Why did Underworld work and The Last Witch Hunter didn't? Like what's the difference? And that's what I think is interesting. Is like what are the small differences? What are the small changes? And the idea of a franchise can still be a hit even if it's only speaking to a very particular kind of audience. Yeah, I throw Underworld in the same realm of franchises like The Transporter, or even like Taken, that aren't trying, or Crank, right? That aren't trying to be the biggest franchises in the world. that are just trying to appeal to movie fans like us, who also every once in a while like to go see a fun, simple B action movie.
Totally.
And I miss that. And like I said, I really honestly don't think it's going to happen anymore. And that's a bummer.
Well, I think every franchise now is starting off thinking they're going to make $5 billion hits.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the problem with the main shows or the main movies we talk about, is that they come out being like, yeah, this is going to be the first to the 7-part arc. And then the first movie feels like the first part of 7 parts. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like Underworld is a complete movie. You know, if you watch the first movie, yes, there's maybe some leftover seeds or intrigue or mystery, but it's still a complete film. You know, like there's still, if that ended on the first one, I feel like there's enough satisfaction there. But yeah, no, this franchise is awesome, and I'm glad.
Well, look at the budgets. You know, to go through the 22 million, 45 million, 35 million. Awakening was 70. That's probably because of the 3D.
Yeah.
And then Blood Wars 35. Though you're not getting a $35 million franchise movie put in theaters today.
No.
And that sucks, and I miss it. And like, yeah, so to me, like Underworld not only rules just because I love Celine and I love the action and the look and it's like the knowing cheese, but I also just love it as a time capsule of a time when franchises like this and Resident Evil could come out and do well.
Dude, you're not even getting a $35 million movie on streaming anymore.
No.
Like, that's like when you got movies like The Gray Man, that's like $200+ million.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't even know what's going on anymore in that world. It's a shame because, yes, there's still such an appetite for these films. Mm-hmm. But Hollywood, as usual, keeps, I think, shooting themselves in the foot, honestly.
Yep.
But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. This was a nice surprise success to series in our month of Will You Be My VAMPentine. Last episode, we talked about Vampirella from 1996, so go check that one out. And then next episode, to cap off the month, we're talking about Vampire Academy from 2014. So
yeah, a return to one of our favorite kind of movies, Chris, a YA adaptation.
Excellent. We'll see how it goes, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, definitely follow along with us at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, rate, review, whatever you do. Throw us a star rating. That'd be awesome. And then just, join the tribe, hit that subscribe, and you'll follow along this loving, blood-soaked month of ours.
See ya. Chris, can I tell you really quickly? I don't even know if you know this. Can I tell you about my personal connection to Underworld? Because I have an interesting one.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Chris, when you and I met in 2014, and the reason I remember that is because we met at San Diego Comic-Con, and shortly after we parted ways, as you know, I was involved in a very serious car accident coming back from Comic-Con. Yeah. And my arm was torn up pretty bad, and I had to get a skin graft operation done on my arm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but so when I went to the hospital, they were looking at my arm, and it was really bad. Like it was. I'm not gonna dismiss this. The injury was pretty bad.
It was bad. I remember you showed me the wreck, and you. Yeah. I remember this.
I had a moment while I was talking to the interns who were coming to look at my arm and some of the doctors, where I was starting to in my head think about okay, what happens if I lose this arm? And I was I even was thinking prosthetics are good nowadays. At least it's my left arm and I'm right-handed, whatever. But they told me, well, you're lucky in that we actually have a very talented plastic surgeon here. He's going to come take a look at it. He just happened to be in doing a consultation on someone else. He came in and looked at it. And he said, yeah, I think I can do the skin graft. I think I can help you here. And so he did the surgery the next day. And obviously for the next couple of days after that, I had to still meet with him, and he was looking at the progress of it. And while we're talking, he's asking me about how the accident happened. And I said, well, I was in a car accident. We were coming back from Comic-Con. He's like, oh, San Diego Comic-Con? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, you guys go to that? I'm like, yeah. He's like, and I thought he was asking because maybe he was interested in that kind of stuff too.
Sure.
And I was like, well, do you go to Comic-Con? He's like, no, I don't. But my brother goes to Comic-Con as a guest sometimes. He would be a guest there. And I'm like, oh, really? Well, who's your brother? And he's like, do you know the Underworld movies? And I say, yeah, I know Underworld. I like them. He's like, oh yeah, well my brother is the guy that like created those. Kevin.
No
and
shit.
I realized my doctor's name was Mark Grievous. And I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, Kevin Griveau, he like took his name and like changed the S at the end to an X because it's like more like cinematic.
Totally.
And I'm like looking at my doctor and suddenly I could see like the resemblance. And yeah, so like my skin graft operation, my arm was done by the brother of Ray's from the Underworld movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've never told me this.
No. I couldn't remember if I had told you that or not, but
I have genuine goosebumps. Like for real. On both my arms.
Unfortunately I can't, but no.
No. For the record, Trev has both his arms. It's
yes,
good.
I do. Yeah.
But
He to be fair, Kevin Grievous, Dr. Mark Grievous did amazing work, and yes, thank you for that. If he's listening, which he's not, I'm sure. No. But I couldn't remember if I told you that, but just a fun little personal connection there.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow,
mm-hmm.
Wow, cool, man. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
He doesn't have that. He didn't have that. He didn't have the voice though. I'll tell you that.
No. It'd be funny if he was like Kevin Grievous. You're like General.
He's like my brother's General Grievous. Like, oh no.
Kenobi.